How you doing, Eric? All right, let's get started. All right, so last week of the mod, and we are going to be discussing supply chain management here. As an admin note, make sure you get everything in. If you haven't submitted it already, make sure you get everything into me. Hopefully by Saturday, um, so I have time to grade it and get your feedback. Well, feedback you have to read afterward, but um, because it's the last week of the mod, needs to get in as soon as possible. So make sure you get everything in early as possible. Of course, you have till Sunday to do your post to your fellow classmates. But if you can get it in earlier, great. Get everything finished up um, and in. That'd be fantastic. All right, so we're talking about supply management. Okay, so some of the LOs. I'm gonna brief, this, and then um, going to give you the rest of the time to really get into taking the exam if you haven't started it yet, if you haven't taken it yet, and also work on some other things if you're missing anything at all. Okay. All right. Let's see. All right. So we're talking about supply chain, right? So basically, we're talking about supply chain. We're talking about a very integral part of any operation, production management operation. Okay, you have to have a very solid supply chain. In not only externally but internally. And when I say externally, I'm talking about when you're going downstream to the customer, right? And then upstream towards the supplier. Okay, so the internal supply management supply chain is totally different than the supply chain that you deal with the customer, right? Because the supply chain that's internal is really there to put together the product or the particular item that the customer is demanding, right? That supply chain is there to meet the demand, all right? And so you have to, the demand itself is the product or the good or service, whatever it is. So you're building or creating that particular good or service. The downstream, of course, the external supply chain is getting the finished product to the end user, the customer, right? And so that's an integral part of supply chain management and operations management in general. And so any little hiccups, any you know pauses, or any thing that disruptions can cause a major delay in your supply chain and getting the product out to the customer, and in turn having an impact on your revenue, which again has an impact on your profit or your bottom line, which can very well affect your company in a negative way, to the point where you may have to let people go or cut projects or liquidate assets. Okay, so supply extremely important at this moment right now. There's a lot of supply chain issues going on due to COVID. Right, one that I find, excuse me, apologize. One that I find extremely interesting is that there's a shortage of chicken wings. Right, if you haven't heard, short of chicken wings. And so, not something that everyone thinks about on a regular basis. I just think about when you go out to a bar or a restaurant, you go watch a game, and you order some chicken wings. But there's a shortage of chicken wings, all right, and so it's affecting those companies that you know have chicken wings on their menu, or specifically companies that that's all they do, right? Take for instance Wingstop, right? So Wingstop has come up with a kind of innovative way in which to address the issue, right? Um, Wingstop has now changed their name temporarily. It's still Wingstop, but they're marketing towards something called thigh stop now, right? So instead of wings, they are making thighs because thighs are more accessible via the supply chain. They don't cost as much because the demand wasn't always there for thighs, right? But now it may increase because there's a shortage of wings, right? And so you may get an increase in thighs, but Wingstop is the first company that I've seen to do something to the point where they're kind of changing the whole dynamic of their business, right? And they're just replacing the primary product, right, and calling it thigh stop instead of wing stop. And I'm sure it's temporary until the shortage, is resolved. But in the meantime, they've come out with some out of the box thinking that has proven, to be somewhat beneficial and working. Okay, people still will continuing to go to Wingstop. It's just that the wings cost more, right? And so the wings cost more because it was harder for them for Wingstop to get it, so they had to pass the cost on to the customer, of course, right? Scarcity uh, causes price to increase, right? And so this is the situation that Wingstop was in, and a lot of restaurants and bars are in. So the prices have gone on up on wings, but it's interesting because of the way they approached it. They didn't just, say, let's just increase the price because our supply chain is not, fulfilling the demand. We will come up with some alternatives. What are alternative supply avenues that we can take into, consideration that we can use in order to, get us through this supply chain shortage. All right. So very interesting. Same thing's happening in the automobile industry, right? With Ford and not having sufficient amount of microchips and motherboards and that kind of thing in order to continue production on the F-150, which is their highest selling vehicle. Okay, and so that's had a major impact on their operations, their revenues, their stock price. I mean, it just totally has had a huge uh, detrimental effect because probably a year or two ago, Ford shifted its focus to trucks and SUVs and was getting away from vehicles, passenger vehicles, and that kind of thing. We're trying to make that transition into electronic vehicles and hybrids, but more or less into the truck and the SUV category. Of course, the Mustang is the staple vehicle. They're never going to get rid of that. But at the same time, now you see that there's a Mustang SUV, right? Something we never thought we'd see, but it's a Mustang SUV. And that is in part due to the fact that they've transitioned transitioned some of the business into SUV and trucks, and also that they are, the supply chain is not providing, the microchips and the motherboards and that kind of thing that they need to, build the other vehicles that they are having in inventory. So, all right. So if you look at this diagram here, it kind of gives you an idea of how the process works, what a typical supply chain looks like. All right. You have your suppliers. Okay. You got your first tier, second tier suppliers. Okay. Basically, these suppliers here supply us, but where do they get their supplies from? Okay. How do they get their supplies? All right. And so we have this group here, and then they provide the factories, the the material that they need to make the product. Those products go into warehouses once they're completed, which becomes inventory at this point, right? So inventory is an asset. Okay, when we talk about accounting, when we talk about inventory is considered asset. So you have these warehouses that are housing all this product, right? And the aim is to get it out to the retail stores for distribution. How do we get them out here? And this is where the logistics piece comes in, the distribution, the supply chain, as far as hey, how do we get the product out? And then, of course, once it gets to the retail stores, it'll go out to the customers uh, via storefronts or e-commerce or whatever the case may be. Okay. So here we go, right? So we have these different tiers of suppliers, right? That go into manufacturer and then warehouse and then retailers, then the consumer, right? Or end user. Okay. So the way it's working is the third tier supply, the second tier suppliers with the first tier suppliers. Okay. and the second tier get their stuff from the third. The first get their stuff from the second. The first supply the manufacturer here, right? And so this guy here basically is what you may consider the genesis or the origin of the supply, right? Let's just say we're looking at lumber or something to that effect, okay? um, and we're going all the way down here to the tree plants. I mean, not the tree farms. Excuse me. All right, we're going down to the tree farms, and this is where the third tier supplier is at. Okay, that third tier supplier is actually chopping down the trees, getting them ready, right? And then they're gonna give them to another company, maybe that is going to cure the trees and the lumber, or do some kind of process to it, um, in order to make it waterproof and all this other stuff, right? And then they will sell it to a lumber yard, or just something to that effect, right? And then they will pass this on to the manufacturer, right? And the manufacturer may be using it to make houses or to build, different furniture, whoever it is. So this could be IKEA, this could be, Johnson. It could be any company, right? It depends on the product, right? And so the manufacturer then is going to build and do their operations and the production. And then once they're done with that, it goes in distribution centers and the warehouses. And we're trying to figure, okay, how do I get it out, right? Because my aim really is to make sure that my warehouse has a high, turnover rate. Okay, has a high turnover rate. I want to get things in and out of the warehouse. Okay, I don't want things sitting around, just collecting dust, because that's money. Okay, the longer it sits in the warehouse, the more it's costing me, because I'm not making any revenue. First thing. Secondly, I have to maintain and secure it. All right, people don't think about the security that comes with protecting your inventory. Right, and depending on how much inventory it is, could be large amount, large footprint with security. Also, is it perishable, right? Is it easily, stolen? There's a lot of things you have to take consideration. So the aim is really to get in and out in the warehouses, um, and coordinate with your distribution channels in order to get it to the retailers. Now, your distribution channels, you may have your own fleet of trucks, right? Or your own fleet of vehicles in distribution modes, right? Take, for instance, Amazon. Amazon initially did not start off having their own fleet of, vans and trucks and that kind of thing. Over time, they now have that. So they have their own distribution channels that they control, right? Prior to this, they used to use the post office, UPS, DHL, FedEx, that kind of thing. Okay. Now that they have their own distribution channel that they created, they can go ahead and control the flow of distribution. Okay. They can control the flow of distribution, because as a manufacturer here, right, you have to understand that Amazon is here. Amazon is probably getting supplies from this first tier supplier, and that's pretty much it, right? Because they're not actually producing anything, right? They are purveyor of goods. They get stuff, they warehouse it, and then people go to Amazon site, and then from there, Amazon delivers it to them. Okay, Amazon not building anything, so this tier of supply is probably where Amazon resides for the most part. Maybe they might go second tier if it's an item that it isn't necessarily um, bought a lot, isn't very common, and so they may have to go to second tier supply because the first tier supply may not have it. But they can still go to first tier supply and ask them for it, and they will then in turn go to second tier supply. But for the most part, Amazon will stick in here because they don't make anything. Okay, they're the manufacturer, but the manufacturer in Amazon's case is just, hey, really distribution centers and warehouse, and how they go about distributing the goods to the retailers, which they don't have, right? So think about that. There's no retailers here. So Amazon pretty much kind of cuts out this middleman here. Okay. Aside from their B2B business, right, which they have Amazon to Ford, Amazon to, different companies, right? Um, that could be considered their retailer, because those folks are going to then take the supplies or the things they get from Amazon and then pass that on to the consumer, right? But at the end of the day, Amazon's business is in this distribution centers and warehouses, and then getting that particular item to the consumer, which is over here via the retailers, which they don't have. So they're going direct to the consumer. Okay. So physical supply here and then physical distribution there. All right. All right. All right. So we have the SCORE, which is the supply chain operations reference. Okay. Supply chain operations reference. And there's really 5 building blocks of 5 processes within the SCORE. Okay. So the SCORE is basically, the planning process. If you want to take consider it that way, right? So the first thing, of course, is planning. Right? You have to coordinate the other functions. Without the plan and trying to, make the connections and the networking and making sure that, hey, we have an idea of kind of how we're trying to approach this issue, it's going to fail. You have to, especially for supply chain management, you have to have a plan in place that and it needs to be a visual plan also, so people can see exactly where the things are moving to. Okay, so one of the keys really in supply chain management is having a visual depiction of how the supply chain looks, how the internal supply chain looks. Okay, people need to be able to see that. Then you have to have the sourcing, right? So the sourcing really is extremely important because where you source your materials from, right, says a lot about what your product is as far as quality, right, and what your company stands for, right? So you want to make sure that when you're sourcing your material or your supplies, okay, that you think about, okay, how much is it going to cost? What country is it coming from, right? What are the ramifications as far as that, as far as, hey, is there some kind of PR or some kind of blowback for me working or sourcing my particular items from a certain place or company? Okay. All right. Once you source your stuff, the next thing is to make it. Okay, you're making your product, right? And having your product go to service ready to go for delivery. Okay, and of course, delivery. This is where the rubber meets the road because it's the logistics. Okay, and this is the true essence of supply chain management, the logistics. It's one thing to say, I'm getting the supplies, I'm making, I'm sourcing, certain supplies. I'm making, whatever it is I'm making, right? And then I'm warehousing it and getting ready for distribution. But without the actual distribution happening, you just have a bunch of stuff in a building. Okay, you just have a bunch of stuff in a building. So you have to make sure your distribution, your logistics channels are well aligned, right? Are ready to go, are reliable. Okay, because if it takes a week for something to get from your warehouse to the retailer, okay, or a week to get from your warehouse to the consumer, okay, um, that's fine, no big deal, right? The thing is that if you say it's going to take a week, it needs to be a week. If you say it's going to take a day, it's going to be a day, right? And so again, going back to Amazon, Amazon has mastered, right, this process. Amazon has mastered the logistics or distribution function when it comes to supply chain management, right? This is what they've hung their hat on. They do it extremely well, right? And it's because they have control of their distribution channels. They have control of their logistics function. Okay, they have the fleet of trucks, they have the fleet of vans, right? And so if you think about how this would work, right, they with the logistics and the delivery of it all, right? They have all these big, huge, major warehouses. And if you ever go drive down the 10 towards Palm Springs, right, you'll see this whole area that Amazon warehouses. And there's other places, of course, where they have them, but the one I'm familiar with are the ones that are on the 10 down going towards Palm Springs. And they're just huge, 6, 7 of them, 8 of them, right? Just huge buildings, they're just warehouses, right? And so from a big picture, right? This is the main hub, this is the central hub. This is where the trucks go and they load up all their gear, right? Load up all the product and stuff that needs to be distributed out. Okay. And then they go to smaller distribution centers that are local. Okay, they go small distributions that are local, and then those local distribution centers then push the product out to the local community wherever it needs to go. Okay, it's a little bit more complex than that, of course, but in general, just to get a kind of uh, a high level overview. That's kind of how it works. It goes from the warehouse. The warehouse gets picked up by the trucks, right, from the main distribution center, and then from there, it gets pushed out to the local or community, the small distribution centers, and then they get it to the consumer or to the retailer, whichever one is where it's supposed to go. Okay, and another good example of how this works is the post office. Okay, because each post office has a huge main processing center, okay, for each state. They have a huge main processing center, probably one or two, right, depending on the area, east and the east side or the north side of of the state or whatever the case may be. And all the mail goes to that main distribution center, right? And that's what it's called. It's called MDC, main distribution center. And then from there, the mail gets sorted out, right, and then gets sent to small distribution centers, which is our post office, okay, which is our local post office. And then from there, the postal workers, right, deliver the mail, right. And so you see how that works. In the process, somewhere, of course, we have mail that gets lost, mail that gets given to the wrong person, and that kind of thing happens all the time, right? So there is a lot of room for error, for honest mistakes within the whole logistics chain, right? There's room for theft, right? Because now you have people that are delivering the product. It's on their hand, the chain of custody, right? And there's a major thing about logistics. Chain of custody is extremely important. Who has it, right? Ownership is 9/10 of the law, right? So whoever is delivering this particular package, right, they have it in their delivery truck, right? Who's to say that they can't take it and just say, well, it got lost, or I never, or I see it on the manifest, but I don't have it here. Okay, so that happens a lot, right? Theft is a huge part of supply chain management, logistics, distribution, that kind of thing, right? The last step is recycle or return, excuse me. So basically, once the product is, out the door, and we have, as a company, we have used up everything, all the supplies that we need to create our product and that kind of thing. And we don't distribute or we don't send everything out to retailers, right? We may put those unused items, right, back into the supply chain. Okay. And what I mean by that is say, hey, we may send it back. We may send back product or material to the suppliers in which we got them from. Okay. Stuff that we haven't used, right? And so you have material that is unused. Maybe we had extra, or maybe something happened and it just didn't need it anymore. And so we return it back into the supply chain so that it can be used later on down the line. Okay. So um, let's look at supply chain performance, right? Delivery, as I said, you need to have on time delivery and you need to figure out what your fill rate is, okay? And what we mean by fill rate is how quickly can you fill the order, okay? How quickly as a company can you fill the order? So if I get a order for 1,000 pieces of whatever product it is, how quickly can I get that to the retailer, right? How quickly can I get that through my process, right? How quickly can I get the supplies? How quickly can I get it through the transformation process? How quickly can I get it distributed and delivered to the retailer? And then how does that, translate into getting from the retailer to the end user, which is the consumer? Now, if the consumer has to go in and it's based on foot traffic or, people just coming into the store, that's one thing. But if it's based on the fact that, hey, someone commissioned or someone, paid to get a certain thing done or made, right, or requested a service, right, that fill rate needs to be pretty quick, right? It needs to be pretty high, right? Because if I specifically paid for a certain thing, I probably want it in a certain amount of time, right? And so you need to be able to meet that requirement. And so you'll see that, when you as a consumer go to certain places and say, hey, yes, I like this thing, and they say, well, it's on back order 2 weeks. And you go, I can't wait 2 weeks. No problem. All right. You go another place and they have it. All right. And you buy it from them, right? That company that didn't have it for whatever reason, right? They're losing out on revenue, right? Their fill rate is not really, and it may be a temporary thing, okay? And most companies, for the most part, don't, they're pretty good about restocking and making sure things are available for consumers. But there's certain things that are in high demand that, it's just a matter of, getting the supplies, and then getting it through the process of from material, from supplies to product. Okay, that can be sold at the retail level. All right, quality. All right, when we look at quality, we want to make sure that the product or service performs as stated. Right, it meets the specifications, and the customer is satisfied. The custom conformance to specifications is probably one of the more important things, right? And you want to make sure that you build the product or good or service the way that it was dictated or annotated to be. Okay. There's no room for, individual, design or adding something to it that you think they might like because you like it. No, the customer asks for XYZ, you give them XYZ. If there's XYZ and then there's A, XYZ, then there's A, you can still do XYZ, but then offer A as another alternative and say, hey, look, I know you want an XYZ, I have it, but I also have A, which is something you can add on for a cost, or we will add that on for you for free, or whatever the case may be, right? So you want to make sure that the product, right, which is the supply at this point, conform to specifications. All right. So if I need, three or a quarter inch screws, okay, I want to get quarter inch screws. Those have to be specific to, what the measurements are and what the specifications are set forth, because those are going into, pre-cut, you know, um, designs, right? When we measured out the car door, we measured out, the transmission, we measured everything out, and these are the screws that we need to make everything fit. I need it to be specifically that because all those holes that are going to take the screws are built for quarter-inch screws, bolts, and that kind of thing. Okay. Um, Product and service performance, of course, is important. You want it to perform, at or above the expectations, right? At or above, preferably above, right? You don't want the product to underperform, right? Underperforming is not good, but also you have to set the expectations for consumers. Okay, if a consumer pays, a dollar, or you as a, manufacturer go to supplier and you pay, 2 cents for a screw, which is normally, on the high end 5 cents, right? You should expect 2 cents worth of quality, all right? You should expect 2 cents worth of performance. Like they say, you get what you pay for. Okay, so you have to take that consideration as to, okay, what quality of product am I looking for? Okay. And based on that, that will determine what quality of supplies that I use. Right. If you think about a Ferrari, a Lamborghini, a Rolls Royce, Bentley, those cars are not made in the same ways as, a Mercedes, certain Mercedes, certain BMWs, even though they're all luxury vehicles, right? They're not made the same way as Kias, right? A lot of that stuff is custom, okay? Custom stitching, custom hand building, when it comes to those vehicles, right? They don't make a lot of them, but they're all made by hand, custom for the most part, okay? And so you want to make sure that the materials or the supply that you buy, right, are, proportional, commensurate with the level of quality that is being expected from the product. Okay, it's big key here. Big key. You don't want to use inferior, um, supplies the material in which to build your particular product, right? And at the end of the day, customer satisfaction definitely is what you're looking for, right? You want the customer to be happy because happy customer means, guess what? They're gonna come back. Okay, satisfied customers tend to come back, and as a business looking for longevity and existing in perpetuity, you want to make sure that people are satisfied and come back to your business because that's how you make your money. All right. Next thing is flexibility. Okay. The ability to kind of look at the market, look at what's going on, and then kind of be able to ebb and flow with those particular changes or those particular influences going on, right? So you may need to, change, how many of a certain product that you are requesting, or how many, you're buying from the supplier, how many suppliers providing you, right? You may need to change the mix, right? You may need, 3/4 inch, a 1/4 inch, a full inch, right? Screws. The ability to, kind of change up what you provide as far as materials and supplies, right, is an important aspect because if I have a change, right, based on something that's out of my control, some external environment influences, right, and I say go to my supplier and say, I need to get, these itty bitty, 1/8 inch bolts, right? The supplier should say, no problem. Okay, I got you. It'll be the same as before. Nothing changed. We have to be flexible in that sense, right? You also have to be flexible in the sense that you, as the manufacturer, and your demand signal from the retailers, right, and from the market, and saying, hey, you know what, we want this particular item, and we want it, like next week, right? Or we wanted it last week, right? Flexibility plays a huge role in the ability to um, get the supplies, be flexible enough, adapt, make the changes, produce the product, get it to the retailer before your competition does. Okay, it's really that's what it boils down to because there's some items in some time frames that it's all about. Hey, where can I get it? Okay, who has it and where can I get it? That's it. I'm not really worried about necessarily the quality of it. I'm not worried about staying loyal to a particular brand. I just need this thing and I need it today. And whoever has it is where I'm going. So as a business, if you can be flexible and adapt and try to, you know, um, make sure that you're not so rigid that you can't, meet the demands of be reactive, I guess, right? In nature, you're gonna have some issues, right? And that's not to say you have to be reactive to everything, because everything that when it comes to uh, production and operations, everything doesn't need to be reacted to. Okay, as a company, just because something's hot right now, it's a trend, and doesn't mean that I need to jump on it. I may, step back and say, you know what, I got it, but that's not for us right now. We're going to stick to what we do, and we will see how this turns out. And then if the case is made, the business case is made that this is something that can create a revenue stream for us, we'll then go back and talk to our suppliers and see if they have the channels in place in which to provide us the supplies that we need to make this particular product, good or service, and get it out in a timely fashion. Can we be competitive is the question, right? Can we be competitive in this particular market, in this particular lane, right? And so you have to take that into account. But flexibility is one of the major keys to supply chain performance, right? Time, right? How long does it take to get your product through the supply chain? Okay, how long does it take? All right, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Is that a reasonable time for me to request, a ton of lumber? Right? I don't know. Okay, but you need to figure out, okay, what's the time, the throughput, for me to get my supplies, because that will in turn tell me how long is it going to take for me to get the product to the end user. Okay. How long is it going to take me to get the product? At the very least, how long is it going to take me to get the product to the retailer? Okay. The end user, depending again on what the product is, may not come for 10, 20, 30, 40 days. Who knows, right? But the retailer is asking me for it at this moment. So I need to go ahead and get that um, get that product to them. But I have to look at my supply chain and figure out how long does it take for me to get the materials necessary so I can get the product created and done. All right. All right. So cash to cash cycle time. This is where I was talking about as far as like days of inventory. Okay. You do not want a bunch of inventory just sitting around. Okay. Um, it's just not good. All right. You want it to either be accounted for in accounts receivable, right? But you don't want it to be, well, it could be accounts payable too, right? Um, they're both good in a sense. So accounts receivable, of course, that means hey, I'm getting money for particular inventory that someone's purchased as a retailer, and it's just a matter of getting them the product. It's sitting in the warehouse. I just got to distribute it out, right? Um, Days in accounts payable, right? How much money do I owe out, right? And how long does it take me for me to pay those suppliers, right? You don't want to, you know, um, lag in paying your suppliers, because if you lag in paying your suppliers will lag in getting you the product, getting you the supplies, right? And when I say product from a supply management standpoint, the supplies, right? The materials that you need, okay? So the smallest amount of days you have, in accounts payable, the better, right? Days in accounts receivable, right? You don't want to, wait either, right, for your money to come in. If you deliver the product, you want to get paid for the product, okay? Sometimes you'll have a credit with the supplier because the supplies, didn't get there in time, or or they're not at the specification that they was requested. There's a whole lot of things. So they have a way of crediting the company for certain things, or saying, hey, you know what, we'll take a look at it and we'll make it right. Okay. And it's all about making it right. So don't forget that to the supplier, the manufacturer is a customer, they're clients. They want to do everything that they can to make sure that their client is happy. Same way that, to the manufacturer, the retailers are clients, right? Or customers. They want to make sure they do everything that's happy. And going down the line to the retailer, we are customers. The consumers, of course, are the end user, the customer, right? And so at every level, everybody's trying to make sure that they meet the mark and keep other people happy. Okay. The suppliers, of course, are making sure that they have the product on hand, and that they can make sure that they get that out to the manufacturers when they need it, or whoever their supplier, if they're supplying another supplier, right? Their third tier, second tier, first tier, whatever the case may be, right? All right. Then we look at cost, right? We look at unit cost, we look at inventory cost, and we just look at the total supply chain cost, right? The suppliers plus the producer plus the logistics. Okay. So you have to account for all three of those costs in order to get your total cost for your supply chain. And then from there, your production cost, all right, your operating costs. And then after that, you can figure out what your profit's gonna be from your revenue. Okay. Simple, uh, simple process. Of course, if you're accountant, there's other things that kind of go in that. Okay. All right. So the real important thing I want you to take care is the bullwhip effect. Okay. So basically, the bullwhip effect is when there's some disruption in the supply chain management, and it kind of affects everything else that's that it it influences or impacts. Okay. So basically, it's kind of like a bullwhip. It hits real quick and hard, and then you can see the trickle. The effect is kind of like it kind of hits everything else, right? And so it results in more inventory upstream. Okay. All right. So that means you as a supplier are going to be stuck, or going to be demanded on, or pressed to provide more materials. Okay. Because somewhere along the line, either from the retail level, right, which is again affected by the consumer, all right, there's a demand, there's a change in demand. Okay. Either it's decreased or it's increased, right? And so that will have an effect which we call the bullwhip effect, because now the retailer's like panicking and they're like, hey, manufacturer, I need more of these, I need more of these, I'm sold out, people are coming in, they're asking for this stuff, I need some like last week, like 2 weeks ago, I need more. And that drives the manufacturer to go to the supplier if they don't have the supplies on hand and say, hey, I need more supplies, I need more supplies. Well, the supplier will go, well, I'll do my best, but I can only work so fast. I can only, supply the supplies so fast. And there's certain supplies that you can't speed up. There's things that you can't, no matter what you do, you can't speed up. So for instance, as a researcher, if you're doing experiments in a laboratory, right, and you have a petri dish and you're trying to grow a culture, it takes 3 days. That's how long it takes for that culture to grow, right? That's how long it takes for penicillin to grow. That's how long it takes for amoxicillin to grow. So you can see what, do a research and development on it, right? Same thing with, someone that has a tree farm, right? I can only cut down so many trees, right? So fast because of my capacity, right? I don't have the capacity to increase any more than where I'm at. Some people, some companies do, right? Some companies will say, you know what? Like for instance, seasonal, bullwhip effect, right? During the holiday season, we see the bullwhip effect in full effect, okay? Because now there's a demand for that hot new toy, whatever the case may be. Now, they may not meet the demand in the timeline that everybody wants them to meet, but they'll eventually meet the demand. But the real onus, the real pressure is going to be on the supplier, right? To make sure that they can supply the supplies that the manufacturer needs, in order to meet the demand, right? And then the manufacturer at that point has to figure out, okay, can I meet the demand based on my capacity, right? Do I need to get external resources to come in and help me produce or manufacture more of this product? Do I need to collaborate with other companies and that kind of thing, right? If it's something they make, then maybe they say, you know what? Yes, we make it here, but we're gonna reach out to China because they have a huge manufacturing labor market component, and they can produce these at a high level. We just need to make sure that they meet our specifications and that we get the supplies and that kind of thing to make our thing, because we don't have the capacity within our plant to do it, right? So the bullwhip effect is a very real thing, and it affects businesses all the time, and just a matter of, hey, when to react to it and when not to react to it. Okay, some things you can see are temporary in nature as far as the demand spike. Other things you just can't call it. You're like, okay, you know what, and there's a demand for it, but I really don't know what to do about it, because I'm sure it may increase, it may not increase, I'm not really sure. So you have to be real careful as a company not to react to that, um, in the wrong way. So you have to have a measured reaction, right? Maybe I'll do half, or 50% more in production, right? But again, going back to my capacity, right? Can I do that, right, based on my capacity? All right. Talking about replenishment lead times, right? So again, going back to the supplier, how quickly can you replenish me, right? Yes, you gave me 100,000 units of lumber. Great. Okay, when's the next shipment coming in? Because I'm already burnt out. I'm already done with what I got. And so I need another shipment of 100,000, right? How long is the replenishment lead time? And is it automatic? Okay. Um, Improving supply chain by reducing total replenishment time, right? So again, the information, right, that is given from the manufacturer to the supplier helps a lot in the supplier understanding how the production cycle works for each company. Okay, this is why when you go into the supermarket or any store, Best Buy, one of those stores, right? They scan the item. There's supply chain function in that. Okay, this is a cost or pricing function in that. I'm trying to keep track of how much inventory I have, because once it gets to a certain point, a certain level, I have an automatic replenishment um, marker that says, boom, okay, it's 10 and below. All right, we need to resupply, we need to replenish. All right, that goes out to the supplier, or the supplier already knows by getting the information from the manufacturer that, okay, it's we're going to need to supply them with more stuff, right? Because I'm getting information. They're sharing information. And you want to share information with your suppliers and your as a manufacturer, because that helps them forecast what's going to go happen, what's going to happen, and it helps them plan out their production plans. Okay, because they know there's going to be an increase in certain things, then they can plan for that, and maybe they plant more trees, or maybe they contract out with another company that help them treat the lumber. So there's different aspects to getting all that together. All right. How do you improve the supply chain? All right. You can change the structure. Okay. That involves, maybe changing the facility or expanding on the facilities. It could be really technology. And I think technology is probably right now the most convenient and most popular way of changing structure. Right, you get a new system in, you utilize, you automate, that helps to cut costs. Right, new products of course can help change the structure, but you don't want to introduce too many products within your manufacturing process. Right, but you can, in your supply chain process, you can, that's not a big deal per se, unless the supply itself, the material itself, is expensive or costly, or just very difficult to obtain. All right. And then the facilities themselves, you don't want to do, you don't want to spend too much money on facilities. Right, that's a one every 10, every 15 year type thing, where you're expanding on the facility. Right, because that's expensive. Right, and you don't want to do that. Right, change systems. Right, again, you can change certain processes, certain flows. Right, you can change the structure of your cells within the company, as far as like the departments. Some departments can be structured in a certain way where, okay, you know what, you guys are just going to handle jets and jet parts. Okay, everything that has to do with the all the jets for the Navy, that's all you. Okay, all the jets for the Marine Corps, that's all you. Right, and everything, every aspect of it, right, you in charge of that. Right, and so this is where the procurement aspect comes in. Right, and those of you who have never done procurement before, procurement is just getting or sourcing products. Right, figuring out how many supply avenues or chains I have, or channels I have, and procuring those items, right, for our production or manufacturing process. Okay, so procurement is part of the logistics and supply chain um, family, and it's a job in its own right, of itself, because there's so many things that go with procurement, because you're in charge of specification, you're in charge of acceptance of the delivery, you're in charge of rebates, you're in charge of making sure that it meets has defects, you're in charge of the whole relationship that you have with certain suppliers. Right, and so as you start, depending on what you're procuring, right? Because that you can be the procurer for, all the wings or something like that for a plane. You could be the procurer of all the wheels or tires and that kind of thing, for a particular product. And then you have to coordinate with other people that are in charge of other parts of the plane, right? Other procurement officers maybe can have an idea. Okay, well, my supply guy, I get this supply from them, but they also have this. Right, how much is it costing, what's the lead time, what's the replenishment time, that kind of thing. Right, so you talk about those things. So procurement is a very interesting job, very well paid folks, within that whole supply chain uh, process. It's fun. You get to do a lot of cool things, go see a lot of cool plants, and just it's just a fun thing. And I did procurement for a while. Very interesting. Boring part about it is, of course, you have to write up all these proposals and that kind of thing. All right. Okay. So next thing is the structural improvements, right, that you can possibly make to your supply chain. All right. Forward and backward integration. Basically, we're looking at how can we keep the flow, right, of the whole process going forward and back. And when we mean forward and back, we mean going to suppliers and moving forward to the consumer, okay, or the retailer. Right. We need to be able to move through that whole process, right, up and down, without any real challenges. Okay, without any real challenges. We can also try to simplify the process, right? Simplify the process in that we can, make it easy for the supplier to just say, hey, we need this. This is when we need it. We need it every 3 months. Drop it off here. It's automatically paid for once we accept it and receive and accept. Okay. There's a lot of things, right? You can, outsource. You can do offshoring, right? You can, um, there's a number of things you can do to kind of, bring the price down. Okay. Um, and also at the same time, um, when you look at the structural improvements, you can try to change the configuration of the factories, right? Or the warehouses or whatever the case may be. That's not the most desirable thing. Okay. Don't like to always change configuration unless it's built for change. Like, when you go to a automobile plant, right? Like I said, I used to work for Toyota, and I go to the plant. And so within the plant, each plant makes certain vehicles, right? And it can be reconfigured to make other vehicles, but it's a pain in the butt to reconfigure a whole plant to make certain vehicles because it takes time, right? You have to clean out the systems, right? Get the processes in order, get everything that is required to make a Toyota Camry as compared to, a Toyota RAV, right? Two different things, or Corolla and some other things, right? To the point where, as a company, um, Toyota has a collaboration with Mazda because those two cars are made on the same platform, on the same chassis. So because they're made on the same chassis, same frame, they make them at the same plant down in Mexico. Okay, so the Mazda 323 is made at the same place on the same configuration as the Toyota Corolla. Okay, different engines, okay, different design, of course, but the base of the vehicle is exactly the same. The chassis is the same, the suspension is the same, right? The transmission is somewhat the same, okay. So those cars, in order to cut cost, we will share a facility together and produce your car. So one week we may produce 323s, the next week we may produce Corollas, or we maybe do it simultaneously and we have two production lines going, but they're not changing any because they're the same car. So at the end of the day, it's the same car, just that at the beginning, we chassis, suspension, transmission, boom, and then once it moves up the line, it diverges and goes its own separate route for the actual body of the car, as far as like the style of the frame of the car, right? The steering wheel, the logo, those kind of things, right? The accessories and the stuff that goes into the car, those are different. But again, those things are put on after the car is basically built, right? Because all the electric harnessing is done, right? All the primary components of the internal aspect of the car are put together, and then after that, we'll go in and put in the pieces, the stereo, the screen, steering wheel, that kind of thing. All right. Oops. All right. So again, when we look at improvements, we can definitely look at lean, right, and try to figure out how can we make it more efficient. Okay, cross-functional teams and partnerships with suppliers. Like I said, Toyota and Mazda have a relationship that they use. They're together and they use the same plan. And probably the same supplier for a number of things because the cars are again built on the same chassis. All right. All right. Okay. So I'm gonna stop here because I want to give you guys time in the class to uh, take the exam. You don't have to stay online, of course, but I want you guys to get in, take this time to take the exam if you so desire, and or catch up on any work that you have missing. Okay, the zeros are not good. The zeros are going to hurt your grade big time. So if you have anything missing that you didn't turn in, get it done and turned in as soon as possible. Okay, get it done and turned in. Yes, you will get some points deducted, but it's better than a zero, right? And I won't necessarily be looking to destroy not give you a decent grade. But I will take points off for it being late, especially if it's something from week 1 through 4, right? Because it's extremely late now. But I want you to get it in because I don't want you to have any zeros, because that will definitely affect your grade no matter what. If you have an A and you have a 0 somewhere, it's going to turn into a low B or a C even. Okay, so you don't want any of that unless it's a 0 in something, depending on the point value. All right. All right. Anybody have any questions? Any questions of me? No questions? All right.
No question.
Okay. No questions. All right. So if there's no questions, I want to say it's been great having everyone in class. It's been fun, and hopefully I get to see you guys again in a different class. I don't know who's taking strategic HR next session, and also organizational theory, behavior. So I'm teaching those 2 classes. So hopefully I get to see you in those 2 classes next week. Okay. Aside from that, I don't have anything else. Like I said, just get your work in, preferably before Sunday. But of course, you have until Sunday to get your paper in. And also, don't forget there's a PowerPoint associated with that. Keep it short, 4 to 5 slides. Don't go crazy with it. And also, any work that needs to be, done and submitted that hasn't been done, get it in. Okay. If you have any questions, anything you need, just email me or text me, whatever the case may be, and I'll do my best to accommodate.
What's
All right.
the password for the exam?
It should be okay. I saw 3 people take it already. I'll check on that, Wayne. I didn't think it needed a password. Did you try to, and it needed a password?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me
It's a
find it.
vaccine, doctor.
What's that?
It's vaccine.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, there it is. Okay.
Capital.
Yeah. Did you hear that?
What is it?
All of it's big. All of the
Vaccine, all capital, vaccine. The word
all
vaccine,
capital.
all capital. Did you get that? Hello?
Yeah, I think so. 1 second.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay.
Yep.
I will see you guys next week, and we'll talk.
All right. Thanks.
Okay?
Bye.
All right.
Thank you, doctor.
You're welcome. All right.
Have a good night.
All right. Have a good night. So.